Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today's video is not going to be discussing how BioWare has deleted the Anthem roadmap even though they're really committed to the game. No, that is not the purpose of today's video. Today we are going to be discussing the IGN interview with Todd Howard when he sat down with hard-hitting interviewer, games journalist Ryan McCaffrey. If you're not detecting sarcasm in my voice, let me tell you, you should definitely be detecting sarcasm in my voice right there. So we're going to be discussing the interview because unlike a lot of people who did videos over the last couple days about this topic, the full interview just literally posted a couple of hours ago. So the people who've already made videos on it didn't actually watch the full video or listen to the full interview. It's over an hour and 20 minutes long. It's almost 90 full minutes of Todd Howard, and I have sat through the entire thing so I can bring you my thoughts on what he had to say here. So obviously there's going to be a lot to get into here. First, right off the bat, I would be remiss if I did not mention something that he said very early on in the interview when Ryan McCaffrey asked Todd Howard about the infamous Horse Armor DLC debacle from Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Now, if you aren't familiar with that, Horse Armor is a meme at this point. It is something that Bethesda introduced well back into the last decade, way before really anyone else had done it. Now, there might be a few instances here and there of people being able to point out someone selling cosmetic skins directly for cash, but to the best of my knowledge, at least the company that popularized it, that first introduced it to the masses with a major game, was Bethesda with Oblivion. Once again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Horse Armor was a joke when it first launched. People said, how could anyone sit here and pay money for something that is just a skin in the game? It's not an expansion of any kind. It's just a skin for your horse. That just makes no sense. Who would buy that? And here we are, fast forward less than 15 years, and we are knee-deep in cosmetics and skins and loot boxes of all types in almost every major release, aside from just a few publishers. So when Todd was asked about this, something came out of his mouth which was mind-blowingly revealing about the games industry. What he said was, people will buy anything. And the problem here is that is the exact line of thinking that is used by publishers and developers, and you can see right into the open window and look inside Bethesda and the machinations that they've had over the last couple of years, what they've been doing by pushing more and more live service games and mobile titles at the detriment of all their other games and franchises. They have been pushing solely into this online space. Now, of course, they've made assurances that Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 will not have these issues, and we're going to get to Starfield in just a minute. But this notion that people will buy anything, especially like we discussed in yesterday's video, when a company like Bethesda has a pedigree and a track record of games that people like that have critical success and have sold millions and millions of copies, that of course people are going to rely on that brand name. They see the Bethesda names and they will go out and, like Todd says, they will buy literally anything, especially if a trusted source like Bethesda is the one giving it to them. Now, when you take that quote and you factor in some of the other stuff he says in the interview, such as when he talks about how they didn't expect to have a very high Metacritic score for Fallout 76. So what that points to is the fact that they go into the game knowing full well, hey, it doesn't really matter. We're Bethesda. We're going to send Todd Howard and Pete Hines up on stage at E3, and people will buy anything. And Todd can go out there and spin miraculous lies up on stage and tell us anything we want to hear to try to get us to buy into this product, because hey, people will buy anything. So what Todd said here in the interview when he said that the company was expecting a not so great Metacritic score for Fallout 76, yet he went up on stage at E3 just months before the game launched and told us how miraculous and how wonderful and how much fun they're having playing the game and how great everything's going to be with Fallout 76, just talking about it in very hyperbolic terms, 16 times the detail. And then the game comes out and meets the expectations of only a small fraction of the audience. And you just have to sit there and think about the fact that Todd is saying, hey, before the game launched, we knew good and well that this was not going to be a critical success. Yet we hyped it up to the heavens anyway. Pete was on Twitter every day talking about how much fun everyone's having playing the game and how great the game's going to be. And Todd doing multiple interviews after E3 talking about how great the game is going to be, knowing full well that no one in the studio actually expected it to be a great game. So what he's saying is he's, in a roundabout way, in a sugar-coated type of way, which Todd likes to do, he's dancing around the issue that he went up on stage last year at E3 and was lying completely because he knew good and well what the product was. Todd is many things, but he's not stupid. And he knows there is a good amount of people, good amount of the player base for Bethesda that will buy into anything that he says. It doesn't matter what the game actually launches it. People will still defend it because, like he says, people will buy anything. So he also goes on and talks about one of their upcoming games, Starfield, which is the game that he says everyone needs to be very patient for. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't really care if the game takes a few extra years to cook because goodness knows that Bethesda clearly needs to do some major work if they want to release a successful game next time around. But we already know that there are people who are lining up to buy that game already despite the failings of Bethesda with Fallout 76. But what he said here, he's making a grand pitch. He is making the claim in this interview that Starfield is going to be, quote, the be-all, end-all of sci-fi games. What was the last company that predicted that their new IP sci-fi game was going to be something that was truly classic? A game that would be compared to Bob Dylan. Oh, that's right, Anthem did that. Oh, and what was the company before that who had a sci-fi new IP who came out and said that it was going to be the Star Wars of video games? Oh, that was Bungie with Destiny. So here we have Todd going down the road that we've seen a couple other developers take before, hyping up their new sci-fi game as if it's going to be the greatest thing that we've ever seen in the sci-fi space. And we know from the launch of Destiny 1 and of course the train wreck that is Anthem that those games don't always pan out quite as promised by the developers. But Todd, he knows once again that people will buy anything, and that when he goes out on stage at E3 to talk about how great Starfield is, about how it has 32 times the detail of Fallout 76, and about how it's the be-all, end-all of all sci-fi games, and he's been working on it for years, and they're just so proud to show it off. He knows that people will buy into that, and that people will line up and flock to buy the game because of the Bethesda name, because they put their trust in Todd Howard for some reason, and he knows that people will go out and buy the game. Doesn't matter what the quality is. People will believe him. He knows that. He knows that good and well. There's always going to be that hardcore following. It's also why he felt like he was able to go out in this interview and make the ridiculous claim that Fallout 76 in its current form is a, quote, fabulous game, and that if people went back to the game now, they'd be really surprised at how good it is. Now, Todd, let me help you out. The game, Fallout 76, is not now, nor has it ever been, a fabulous game. Even the people who play it all the time and really like it, I don't think there's too many of them that will tell you it is an absolutely fabulous game. Because that's frankly absurd. Like I just mentioned, it is literally the lowest reviewed AAA game of this entire generation. So to say that the game now, 7 months later, after a few minor additions for content and a few extra events, is somehow in a fabulous state, no, that is ridiculous. And it ties in directly into yesterday's video where I discussed the "it's really good now" fallacy. Because here we have Todd trying to make that claim. Oh, the game's good now. Sure, we charged you for it last year. Sure, it was half-baked. Sure, we should have allowed people to play the game for longer, aside from the asinine beta periods that they had when they literally were running 2-hour beta periods and then shutting the servers down for 3 days and then putting it back up for 4 hours and then pulling it back down for 2 more days. And then finally, one day, I think they let us play for 9 full hours. And that was what they concluded would be necessary for a beta test from a company that had never before done an online game. Bethesda Game Studio has never done an online game. But that's all the testing they were going to need. 2-hour windows, a couple days a week. Sure, that's enough testing. And I think we all know how that turned out. Todd describes it in the interview as, quote, bumps in the road. There's some more sugarcoating. No, Todd, that wasn't bumps in the road. It was a gigantic disaster of a launch. One of the worst launches that we've ever seen in gaming. Certainly one of the top 5 worst launches of the entire decade. And that includes games like GTA 5's terrible launch window. So for him to describe the issues that the game had at launch, the catastrophic issues it had at launch, as mere bumps in the road, and for him to suggest that the main criticisms that people had for Fallout 76 was that it wasn't a traditional Bethesda game, that it was an online game that people just didn't want from them. Sure, that was an issue right after E3 for a month or so. People were kind of up in arms about that, but eventually people just accepted the fact that the game was or was not going to be what they wanted it to be. It's going to be an online game. Sure, it wasn't what Bethesda normally made, but for Todd to come out and say that the main criticism of the game post-launch was because people just weren't expecting that type of game is sheer and utter nonsense. The game is a mess, not just from a technical level, but just as a basic gameplay level. The mission structure is horrendous. The overall storyline and how they handled it with the lack of human NPCs, the lack of any settlements or anything in the game that even closely resembles what you would see in a Fallout game, besides the art assets. I mean, just the notion that there was just such little stuff to complain about, that the criticism that people had with the game were just superficial stuff that didn't actually really have too much to do with the game, is sheer and utter nonsense. And Todd's going to try to sell us that story anyway because he knows, hey, people will buy anything. And that doesn't just go for consumer products, it also goes for whenever he opens his mouth and starts spewing his nonsense, whether it be on stage at E3 and in interviews. You know, for example, that people are going to be clinging to that line he said about Starfield. For years we're going to see people saying, well, Todd Howard said it's going to be the be-all, end-all of sci-fi games, so it's going to be, because there are people that will buy into nonsense like that and will believe it. And there's probably people right now putting out videos talking about how excited they are for Starfield based on Todd's sugarcoating prediction of the future about how we're all going to be so excited and the game's going to be the be-all, end-all of gaming. And that's just one example. It all comes full circle because, you see, Todd shamelessly sat here in this interview. If you hear the smug tone he has throughout the entire interview, it's obvious that they didn't actually learn anything about Fallout 76. They didn't internalize any of the issues. They didn't think that there's really any major issues. He thinks the game's fine now. He said it doesn't matter how the game launches, it's how it ends up. Well, first off, Todd, it's still not in a good state now. And yes, it absolutely does matter how it launches because you lost most of your player base. You alienated, before launch, millions of players just by the confusing way that you guys decided to launch the game. The terrible beta period that you had, where you should have just had an open beta, not this closed beta locked behind a full $60 paywall to get people to buy the game first so they can try it out. And then when there was multiple issues, when people told you for months what they wanted and expected from the game, and it took you just now are getting around to put in some minor things like player vending. Forget about the private servers you promised. I told everyone that we weren't going to be seeing those until the fall, and we still don't have any notion of a date of when those might be coming. We're now almost 7 months since the game launch, and we haven't heard any word at all about when those storied, fabled private servers will be coming. And here is Todd already laying the groundwork for the marketing campaign for Starfield. That's all this is. It's also, am I supposed to believe, am I supposed to buy into the fact that it's mere coincidence that Todd Howard is doing this interview now, just a week before Bethesda goes back out on stage at E3? He's clearly trying to smooth things over, pave the way, sugarcoat the path for him and Pete to go back out on stage so they can try to sell us on more content for Fallout 76, because he already said, hey, we got stuff coming for E3. We got a lot of announcements about Fallout 76, and we think people are going to be really excited about it. That is one of the key phrases you'll hear from developers all throughout the last couple of years. We have some announcements. We're really excited about it, and we think you will be too. That's something we hear over and over again, to the point that I just want to drive a corkscrew through my temple the next time I hear it. I won't do that, but I'd like to. Anyway, this video has gone on long enough. Like I said, I don't want to sit here and just rehash everything that everyone else has already talked about based on the snippets of the interview we had before. I wanted to talk about the overall interview. I wanted to hear the whole thing, take it in context. A lot of it was just mere fluff. At least the first 45 minutes of the interview didn't really have too much substance at all. And then the last half did have a lot of stuff. But of course, we did have the key phrase. Once again, I'll go back to it because it is so pertinent to today's conversation around gaming. People will buy anything. That's a quote from Todd Howard. Anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel. Head forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11. And yes, I am working on the next game video for my Games of the Decade series. Episode 2 will be up hopefully tomorrow. The editing is almost done. Hopefully we'll get that rolled out for you guys tomorrow. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Keep it turned to 11.